What about if you weren't an architect, what would you be? This will help me later on if I have to throw in some extra creativity.
I don't know, so one of our friends is the athletic director at the Potomac School.
Okay.
I thought,
It's always seemed like
that'd be like
job.
a pretty good job, you know?
Yeah. Welcome everyone to the Ask an Architect show. Here with me today is Sean Stadler from WDG Architecture. We're going to go through his background, kind of get some advice from him on what he thinks are maybe some of the best attributes for people to bring to a firm early on in their career, and really try to get his perspective on what it's like out there in the profession. Before we get started, I wanted to say thank you to our sponsor, the AIA, the American Institute of Architects. They're a huge supporter of us and this program in particular, so thank you, AIA, for all you do for us. All right, Sean, so with that said, let's get started. Why don't we get a brief introduction, kind of the 77-second background, who you are and why you matter.
I'm not sure I matter, but I am an architect. I've been practicing for a little over 20 years, I guess now. Originally grew up in Cleveland, the only college graduate in my family, and so kind of jumped into architecture with no real guidance. I think it was just, Legos, as most architects.
That'll do.
And I've been in Washington, D.C. for now, I guess, 18 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so most of your professional career has been here in D.C.
It's hard to believe, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you started at Kent State,
I did,
right?
yep.
So take me through that transition. What brings one from Kent State in Ohio to Washington, D.C.? What was attractive about this spot?
Well, I had to take my talents to Washington.
To Washington.
Now, I think, growing up in the Midwest, and particularly in Cleveland, there was, I don't know if it's, kind of a born instinct or mentality that you needed to kind of leave home to be successful.
Yep.
So I had always thought that I would kind of leave the area, and had a number of different opportunities, and had some really great mentors in Cleveland. And I remember sitting down with one of them at one point in time and discussing, hey, here's a couple of the options I'm thinking about. What do you think? And at that time, LA, the West Coast was kind of hot.
Sure.
Chicago's always a great place
Yeah.
for architecture. New York is always, pretty exciting. And, there was this couple of little trips to Washington, D.C. that I had taken, kind of interested me. And I had this conversation, and the architect at the time had told me, Midwestern on the West Coast probably isn't going to get kind of the lifestyle out there. And a Midwestern in Chicago is just going to go from here to a more competitive environment.
Yeah,
and
sure.
He said, if I was you, I'd go to the East Coast. If you're going to go to New York, do that early in your career. But on the East Coast, a Midwestern kind of work ethic will stand out. And he said you'd probably be successful. And so I took his advice. I had an opportunity. We were working with a firm in Cleveland, David M. Schwartz.
Okay. Yeah.
Who
Very
we were
popular
associated with to do the Cleveland Symphony Hall with.
Okay.
And when that project finished up, he had this little old NBA, NHL arena in Dallas to do, and we were actually one of the associated firms with that project. So
Okay.
myself and one other gentleman from that firm in Cleveland came up and worked for 10 months in David's office, and he had decided to ask me to stay, and I accepted.
And that was it.
Yeah, that was kind of it.
Excellent. And then, obviously, at some point, you transitioned over to WDG Architecture, and that's where you've spent most of your career. Right?
Yeah.
Managing principal now. So after what is it, 15 plus years at WDG, you've obviously probably had the opportunity to make your mark on the firm and influence the culture there a little bit. What is the culture at WDG? Within the staff and with the team and the types of clients you guys take on.
Well, so the Washington market, I think, is a very interesting market. For a long time, there's been this movement of young urban professionals. And so, we've been very fortunate to be in housing, particularly with, I think the last big housing boom was in the 60s. So there hadn't been a lot of new urban multifamily, across the country. So we as a firm kind of took advantage of that and really strengthened our practice. Our culture is one of which, I think, it's similar in a lot of firms, that there's a lot of opportunity. We have a very open kind of culture that really, I think, rewards hard workers, rewards creativity, rewards passion. And so I think those that are successful in the firm are those that are kind of go-getters, self-starters. And then, we have long-term senior architects that are there really for advice and for guidance, and so we can help grow our young staff into really productive professionals.
Let's piggyback on that a little bit. Obviously, you're a managing principal, and as our students eventually want to get out and obviously grow to a position like that. What does it mean to be a managing principal? What's your day-to-day look like? Because we get a lot of folks on the show who are in the earlier stages of their career, not a lot who are kind of have reached the more senior management level. So what does that mean for those of us who haven't maybe seen that position, on the inside very closely?
It's interesting. I think you kind of go through your career. You always think that boss or that principal or that partner, has all the answers. And the longer you work in the profession, the more you realize that they don't have any more answers than you do. They just have a little bit more experience, a little bit more, ideas about, how to do things and confidence on, taking a chance.
So it's almost the intangibles.
It really is. I mean, early on in your career, you don't realize how much time you get to spend designing. And as you grow into your career, how much more time you're managing the business of the practice. Sure. And, really responsible for, we have an office of about 120 in Washington and an office in Dallas as well. So you're responsible to keep that, firm successful, grow it. We're really, I always described our firm as a large firm with a small firm mentality. We're really a family. And so everybody that works with us is really part of our family. And so, it's important for us that they're happy and that they're successful. Sure. And if they're successful, we're successful.
So yeah, it's almost like finding out what the motivations are for them personally and professionally, and then trying to figure out how you can deliver upon that within your firm.
Yeah.
Position them for the right experiences, the right opportunities, but also obviously get the work done and stay profitable at the end of the day.
Right.
So I've looked over a lot of your work just from the WDG website. I mean, there's a lot of great design happening there. Can you tell us a little bit about a specific project that was really interesting or fascinating to you, and that really was either a great opportunity design-wise or just maybe impacted, how you managed from there on out? Is there one project in particular that stands out?
I'm not sure if there's just one project, but National Harbor, which is it's a very large development, I guess in the late '90s that we were part of, was this really ambitious project for a developer locally that had, I forget exactly how many acres, but he had the land for 10 years. It had gone through some entitlement. The Woodrow Wilson Bridge was being rebuilt, and it was an area of Prince George's County, southern Maryland, that had been kind of desolate and the plan was to, kind of create this whole little town atmosphere from nothing. It started with the Gaylord Convention Center, and then from there it grew into a real kind of mixed-use cultural kind of center. So we did, we were involved in 4 different projects in the Main Street on American Way. And so I remember driving up initially, where it was just in a truck, driving up the mountain with Milt Peterson, who was the owner, and him explaining his vision and what we were going to do. And over the course of that project, it was just really incredible to watch it go from a dirt hill to really a kind of a whole town.
Yeah, and to be so close to the city at the same time, and to have that expanse of nothingness.
Yeah.
Obviously, there was an opportunity there. So,
Yeah.
Let's move from the project side to the client side a little bit. Can you give an example of or a situation with a client that maybe was really challenging for you personally, or that helped you grow a certain way? It gives us a sense of, our students know that it's not always just design and the project, it's about the people involved. So sometimes managing people can be the most difficult aspect of the project. So there's just, without naming names or going into specifics, but is there, or maybe it's just a high level, what has been most challenging for you in terms of working with, different clients at different times and, throughout the years?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of clients out there, good and challenging. I think that personality is a big thing. I think managing expectations is a big thing. I think if you start a project right and you communicate really well between yourself and your team and the client, and understand what their expectations are, what's motivating them to do the project, you tend to be on a better path. But some clients are extremely demanding, or may believe that they have different ideas on the process, or might not know the process in a way that we know it, and so it becomes a real challenge to try and align everybody's kind of goals and intentions, and so some of those can be a budget concern, some of those can be a schedule concern, some of those could be just general demographics about our project and how they're going to reach the market, and then our firm's priorities as well.
So how do you solve when there are those challenges? What's the key attribute that helps you solve it? Is it communication? Is it getting on the same page up front? It sounds like that's the key part of it as well. In some cases, is it just not going to work? Is it a constant struggle?
We always make it work. I think we're a firm that has a reputation. We've been in DC for almost 70 years now. So we've had a lot of success, and it's been relationship building. And so I think you have to gain the client's trust, and then you have to do what's right for the project first. And sometimes it means that we're going to take a loss. Sometimes it means that we're going to do some things that we'd rather have done differently. But you have to look at the project and what the success of the project means through the client's eyes.
So tough decisions are just a reality of the situation.
Yeah.
Continuing along the personal lines, but kind of moving it in-house a little bit and thinking about young professionals coming up, people who are graduating and in the first few years of their career. I wanted to ask you a series of almost rapid-fire questions about the best traits or the best aspects that you think are advantageous in a firm for a young professional. The first thing I want to ask you is, what do you think the best personality attribute is to bring to your first job? What's key for that first job?
Enthusiasm.
Enthusiasm. What's the worst personality attribute?
I don't know if this is an attribute, boastfulness, kind of thinking that you're more than you are.
Maybe pride and overconfidence.
Yeah.
And that seems pretty easy. It's interesting. Neither of those are technical. Any person can adjust and make that happen. Enthusiasm, by all means, for somebody in the early part of their career, is a really easy, energetic attribute to have.
Yeah.
What's one thing a new designer can do to acquire additional responsibility quickly? People come in, they want to kind of jump up the ranks and take on as much as they can and grow quickly. What's the best way to do that?
Just, do more than it's asked. Be hungry. I think there's a constant idea out there that somebody's just going to plop a project in your lap and say design it. And it just doesn't happen that way. I think, when we work with people, we challenge to see, what they're capable of. And those that, take the extra effort. I mean, at the end of the day, we all went through design school, and we all, pulled all-nighters. And the reason we pulled the all-nighters was because it was the time to make the project better. I mean, you could do a project in 6 hours and complete the task, or a lot of the times you could look at that design and refine it and make it better, and that's a time issue. So, I think we need to be time conscious and effective and efficient, but hard work and dedication and looking and exploring at other options or something that only extra time can really do. I mean, I think that when you look at the people next to you, work harder than them. I mean, you'll never ruin your career by working as hard as you can.
That's a great quote. We may put that one on Instagram, Sean. What about the challenging situations? We have had a variety of folks come in here. People who have been at one firm for 15 years, 20 years, or their whole career. Some people who have moved around an awful lot. And there are very different perspectives on the advantages or disadvantages of both. So when something's not working, or how do you know when it's not the right fit and it's time to move on and try something else?
Well, I think that, if you're unhappy every day you go to the office, that's probably a pretty good indicator. If you're not challenged, if the time during the day it seems like it's dragging on, I mean, those are probably good indicators that you're not, pushing yourself to your limit. And sometimes it may not be about moving. It may just be about communicating with, your bosses that, hey, I need a little bit more. I mean, I think the idea of moving around, at least in my opinion, is more about understanding the distinctions between what's the profession versus what's the kind of office. And I think that if your first couple of firms are very instrumental in your career development. It's funny, I've been at WDG for 15 years, but the first couple of years were more instrumental in how I think and how I design and how I understand the practice. So, there's a number of reasons why you might move, and it may just be a geographic move.
Sure. Change of pace, something different.
It may be that you've realized that there's not the opportunity that you're looking for within that firm in the time that you had planned. Some of that is just, it's kind of, it's just the market, right?
Yeah.
I think I came into the profession in the early 90s where there was a real shortage of architects at that kind of level. So there was a lot of opportunities. And so you just you need to really understand your value, what you like to do, and what parts of the practice that you can take advantage of.
So let's say somebody sees a lot of value in staying in one place and growing within a firm. What does it take to stay at somewhere for 15 years, to keep it fresh, to keep being inspired, and to keep being motivated day in and day out, to come to that same place? What's kept it fresh for you?
I think it's really about understanding yourself, understanding your own goals, because I can teach a young architect how to detail a building, but I can't tell them how to run their lives. I can't tell them what's important to them. So real, personal soul searching is critical. I mean, my only goal when I moved to WDG was to make an associate, and I very distinctly knew when I took the job, hey, I'm gonna go here. I know I have something to bring to the table. Let's see what the firm has, and it was what it's about. And if I make an associate, then I've kind of
You've achieved
achieved my goal, and then I'll reassess. And I kind of reassessed on an annual basis, and I liked the people I was working with. If you're there for 40 plus hours a week, you're probably there more time than you're with
Yeah.
the people outside of work.
Right.
And so if you don't like those people, it's probably not a good fit. But if you enjoy them, the work is always work at the end of the day. I mean, there's a passion to architecture, but we're still earning a living, so it's work. I think I had a friend once tell me, he said, Sean, it doesn't matter what you're doing, it all pays the same. It's still work.
Yeah. That's interesting.
And so, and then I think your ability to explore what you're interested in. If you find the environment that allows you to explore and take chances and fail, then I think those are things that, at least for me, were important. My ability to change some of the directions of the firm and investigate things that I was interested in, were critical, and the firm encouraged it.
Let's talk about that firm management a little bit more. Obviously, as you grow in your position and become more of a manager, mm-hmm. You have more operational skills. You start to look at business development and all the different business operations that go into the firm. What are a couple interesting or useful recommendations you can give to folks about the business side of architecture that maybe they're not getting in school? What have you learned along the way that you didn't realize when you were probably your first few years out of school?
So I will tell you, when I was in college, some crazy group approached me for a summer job to sell books door to door, and it was a bizarre kind of summer job, but it was actual sales training, mm-hmm. And I learned how to sell.
Yep.
And it's not in the traditional curriculum of architecture school. And it's not in the traditional experience of an architect. So, that was a really good opportunity that I had. But you have to be able to kind of connect the dots there on how they affect you professionally. Business development is all about relationships, and learning about your clients, learning about their personal lives. It's not just business. I think sometimes we think of business development as, I've got to be the hard salesman, mm-hmm. and really, what's coming up next, and, what are you going to do? And it's so much more about building a relationship with that client, that they want to work with you. Again, they want to be with people they like. They want to be with people they trust. Because at the end of the day, they're taking a lot of risk in a project, and so they want to be able to trust you. So the best thing, you can do is to always work with the idea of making that person look good. Mm-hmm. And early on in your career, when you're working with lower level people on the opposite end of the table, they're eventually going to mature in their career too. So they will be decision makers. So the sooner you kind of develop those relationships, the longer lasting that is. And I think involvement in organizations like AIA or ULI or other groups like that outside of the office setting allow you to interact with other, seasoned professionals, other potentially clients, and so get outside of the office. It's not just about, the work in the office.
Yeah, I love that, because it's not something you need an MBA to know how to do. Relationships are something anybody can work on and perfect and get better at just by getting out there and networking and doing that type of thing. Thanks so much for coming today, Sean. I think a lot of your kind of the recommendations or attributes you highlighted here are great because they're simple and they're straightforward. There's nothing highly technical or that's anybody can't go out and learn or figure out or try to get better at. So I want to end on a little bit of a softer note. You mentioned you have a couple young kids. What about being a parent, or what do you see through working with your kids that helps inform your practice or makes you a better architect? You said 9 and 10 are your kids, so you've had some years with them now. What do they teach you about architecture or about just being a better architect?
Patience.
Huh.
Kids they refocus your priorities. Mm-hmm. They force you to be more efficient during the day because you want to be with them in the evenings.
Sure.
And then just the ability to teach, and you learn how to teach, how to listen, And I think in the office, whether it's our staff or our clients, sometimes we don't listen as well as we could.
Mm-hmm.
And children really teach you if you're not listening that they're not going to give up.
Excellent. Well, that's a fantastic way to put a bow on it. Sean, thanks so much for coming today.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it. And thanks so much for joining us on the Ask an Architect show.